She shouted at me like I was nothing. But what she didn't know was that her husband was standing right behind her. That moment is burned into my mind. Her voice sharp, slicing through the quiet afternoon, words trembling with anger I couldn't understand. The sunlight was spilling through the kitchen window, painting golden patches across the tiled floor. I remember how the scent of freshly brewed tea filled the room. I was standing by the counter, holding a small plate of mango slices that cut for her because she said she loved them. But that kindness, that gesture of a mother trying to connect, it was thrown back in my face. My name is Amara, and I've always believed that love can heal most wounds. But that day, I learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than love. Before everything changed, my house was full of laughter. My son, Ryan, had always been my pride. He was gentle, thoughtful, the kind of boy who still called me every evening just to ask if I'd eaten. After his father passed, Ryan became my reason to keep going. We shared a rhythm, morning tea together when he was home, long talks on the veranda when the world outside felt too fast. When he told me he'd met someone, Mom, her name's Zara, I felt both nervous and excited. He sounded happy, but kind of happy a mother prays for. I met Zara for the first time on a Sunday afternoon. She was polite, beautiful, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She carried herself with confidence, maybe too much of it, but I told myself she's just young. She'll soften with time. The wedding came quickly, small and elegant. I stood beside Ryan as he smiled under the soft yellow lights, his bride radiant beside him. That night, when everyone left, I sat alone on the porch. The music had faded, the guests had gone, and I whispered a prayer. Please, God, let my son always be this happy. For a while, he was. They lived with me after the wedding, just until they found their own place, as Zara had put it. I was fine with that. The house had always felt too quiet anyway. The first few weeks were smooth. I cooked, they worked, we shared small dinners. But soon, I noticed the change. It started with little things. She stopped joining us for breakfast. She said she wasn't hungry in the mornings. The soft good morning she used to say became a silent walk past me, her eyes fixed on her phone. When I tried to talk, she'd smile, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile people give to end a conversation before it even begins. Ryan didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He'd rush off to work, kiss her goodbye, then call me later to ask, Mom, Zara's adjusting okay, right? And I always said, yes, she's fine, because I didn't want to worry him, but I wasn't fine. There were evenings when she'd sit on the couch scrolling through her phone, and I'd ask softly, Zara, would you like tea? She'd glance up for a half second, then say, no thank you, without even looking at me again. It hurt more than I'd admit. I'd raised my son to be respectful, to treat people with warmth, yet here I was, feeling like a guest in my own home. Still, I told myself, give her time. She's new to this family. Maybe she just needs to feel comfortable. I kept trying. I cooked her favorite dishes, complimented her on her clothes work, offered help with chores. She refused it all politely, and that politeness became a wall between us. Until one afternoon, the wall cracked. It was a quiet Thursday, the kind of day where the world feels still, like it's holding its breath. I was in the kitchen, making lunch. Fish curry, her favorite. I heard footsteps behind me. Zara, I said, smiling, you're home early. Are you hungry? She didn't answer. I turned around, wiping my hands on a towel, and saw her standing there with her arms crossed and her eyes sharp. Amara, she began, her tone low. Can I ask you something? I nodded, my heart already uneasy. Why do you keep interfering in everything? I froze. What do you mean? You keep asking Ryan about what we're doing, where we're going, what we're eating. You go through the laundry and comment on my clothes. You make me feel watched in my own home. Her voice rose with every word, slicing through the air like knives. I tried to speak, but my lips trembled. I didn't mean to. No, you did mean to. You act like you're being nice, but it's controlling. You don't want to let us live like adults. You treat Ryan like a child. The plate in my hand slipped, shattering on the floor. The curry splattered across the tiles. My chest tightened. Zara, please stop pretending, Amara. I know what you're doing. You're trying to make him choose between us. I couldn't breathe. Those words cut deep because they weren't true. Every day I prayed for their happiness. Every day I told myself to stay quiet, to let them live their life. She kept talking, louder now. You think your little acts of kindness fool me? I see the way you talk to him when I'm not around. You want him to feel guilty for loving me. And then she said it, the sentence that broke me completely. Maybe it's time you stop pretending to be the perfect mother. Her voice echoed through the kitchen. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but words failed me. Then silence. Her expression expression changed. Confusion flickered across her face because behind her, standing by the doorway, was Ryan. He had heard everything. He looked between us, his mother shaking with shock, and his wife frozen mid-sentence. His jaw tightened. The air was so still, I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. Zara's face paled. Ryan, but he didn't say a word. He just stared at her, disappointment filling his eyes, and then turned to me. Mom, he said softly, go sit down, please. My knees felt weak as I walked to the dining chair. My hands trembled as I held onto the armrest. I heard his footsteps, calm but heavy, as he followed Zara into the hallway. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alone in my own house. I don't know how long I sat there that day. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The afternoon light slowly turned to gold, then to shadow. The scent of curry still lingered in the air, mixed with the faint smell of broken porcelain. From the hallway, I could hear their voices, muffled at first, then rising, then silence again. I didn't want to listen, but every sound pierced through me. Finally, the door creaked open. Zara walked past me without a glance, her face cold, her phone in her hand. She went straight upstairs. Ryan followed, slower. He stopped by my chair. Mom, he said softly, are you okay? I looked up, forcing a small smile. I'm fine, but I wasn't. He crouched beside me, his hand resting gently on my arm. I heard everything. You didn't deserve that. I shook my head. Don't say anything, Beta. These things happen. Maybe she was just upset. He sighed, his eyes heavy with something between sadness and guilt. I should have noticed sooner. I reached for his hand. You love her. That's all that matters. He looked away. Love doesn't mean ignoring what's wrong. That night, he didn't eat dinner. Neither did she. The house that once felt like a home had turned into something else, a place filled with whispers and distance. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, as I always did. The sky was still gray, the air cool. I made tea for myself and sat by the window, listening to the birds outside. I told myself to be strong, to let time heal whatever this was. But time didn't heal it. Things changed after that day. Zara avoided me completely. She cooked separately, washed her own dishes, and kept her door shut most of the time. Even Ryan, though kind as ever, had a new weight on his shoulders. He spoke less, smiled less. Sometimes I'd hear them arguing behind closed doors, hushed, tense voices late at night. I'd stay in my room, pretending not to hear, my heart breaking quietly. One evening, I heard him say, Zara, she's my mother. You can't talk to her that way. Her reply was sharp, trembling with anger. Then maybe we shouldn't live here anymore. I remember the silence that followed. It was long, heavy, painful. The next morning, I saw a suitcase by the stairs. Zara was standing beside it, her expression unreadable. Ryan stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. He said, we're going to stay at her cousin's place for a few days, just to clear our heads. I nodded, even though my chest tightened. Of course, Beta, you should do what's best. He hugged me before leaving. She didn't. As the car drove away, I stood by the gate, watching the dust rise behind them. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stood there, the wind brushing against my face, the silence of the empty house pressing in around me. The first night alone was strange. The house felt too big, too quiet. I made dinner out of habit, 3 plates instead of 1, then sat down and realized how empty the table looked. For the next few days, I kept myself busy. I cleaned every corner, watered the plants, mended old clothes, anything to fill the silence. Ryan called me every night. He said they were fine. He said Zara just needed space, but his voice sounded tired. On the 5th day, he came home alone. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. He didn't say much at first, just sat down and drank the tea I placed before him. Finally, he spoke. Mom, she left. I froze. What do you mean, left? He said she packed her things and went to her parents' house. She said she needs time. His voice cracked on the last word. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to comfort him, but I also didn't want to speak against her. She'll come back, I said softly. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're hurt. He shook his head. It's not just about that day. She said she feels like she can't live under the same roof as you. I fell silent. The words stung, even though I'd done nothing but try to make her feel at home. He continued, Mom, she thinks you're trying to control her, that you want me to choose between you. I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who once believed I could do no wrong. And for the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. I didn't blame him. Love can twist our vision, make us question even even the people who've never failed us. Still, I said calmly, Ryan, if she feels that way, then maybe I should step back. You're her husband first now. You must make her feel secure. He looked up sharply. No, Mom, you're not the problem. I see that now. I smiled faintly, trying to hide the ache in my chest. Maybe, but sometimes being right isn't enough. The weeks passed. He went to work, came home, ate in silence. We didn't talk much about Zara. It felt like if we said her name out loud, the wound would open again. Then one morning, as I was sweeping the front porch, a car pulled up. My heart skipped. It was her. Zara stepped out, dressed neatly as always, her expression calm but distant. I didn't know what to do. My hands shook slightly as I placed the broom aside. Zara, I greeted softly, you're home. She hesitated before answering. I came to pick up some of my things. Of course, I said, stepping back. She walked past me without another word. I watched her climb the stairs, her perfume lingering faintly in the air. Jasmine and something sharp. I wanted to stop her, to talk, to apologize, even though I'd done nothing wrong. But something inside me told me to stay silent. A few minutes later, I heard her in the bedroom. Drawers opening, zippers closing, then a voice. Ryan had come home early. What are you doing? He asked. I told you, I'm taking my things. I can't stay in that house anymore. It's our house, he said firmly. No, Ryan, it's your mother's house. It's always been hers. I just lived there like a guest. There was a pause, a long, aching pause before he spoke again. Zara, the only one who made you feel unwanted was yourself. The silence that followed was absolute. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Even from the hallway, I could feel the weight of his words sink into the walls. Zara didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer but colder, like something inside her had already decided. Maybe, she whispered, but I'm done trying to prove myself in a house that isn't mine. I heard the zipper of her bag close. Footsteps moved toward the stairs. Instinctively, I stepped back, pretending to busy myself with the flowers by the doorway. When she passed, our eyes met for a split second. There was no anger there, only exhaustion. Take care of yourself, she said quietly, not meeting my gaze for long. Before I could answer, she was gone. The door closed behind her, the echo lingering like a sigh that refused to fade. Ryan stood at the top of the stairs, his hand gripping the railing, his shoulders slumped. He looked down at me, and I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd cry when he broke his toy, the one who'd run to me when the world felt too heavy. She's not coming back, is she? He asked softly. I shook my head. I don't know, Bitter. Maybe not today. Maybe not ever. He came down the stairs slowly, each step heavy with something unspoken. When he reached me, he just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. And that's when I finally cried. All the pain I had been holding inside, the quiet humiliation, the guilt, the confusion, it all poured out. But not because I was angry at her. No, I cried because somewhere along the way, we'd all lost something. Days turned into weeks. Zara didn't call and Ryan didn't try to chase her anymore. I think a part of him hoped she'd realize what she'd done, that she'd come back with an apology, but she didn't. He threw himself into work, spending long hours at the office, coming home late, exhausted. Sometimes I'd find him sitting in the dark living room, staring at their wedding photo. Once I asked softly, should I put it away? He shook his head. No, it reminds me that I still have to learn what love really means. I didn't ask again. I tried to keep the house alive, cooking his favorite meals, putting flowers in the vase, keeping things the way they were. But I noticed the way he'd pause at empty spaces, the way his eyes lingered on the chair she used to sit in. One night, as I was folding laundry, he came into my room quietly. Mom, he began, his voice uncertain. Do you think I failed her? I looked up. Why would you think that? He sat down on the edge of the bed. Because maybe she wasn't wrong. Maybe I didn't make her feel like she belonged. Maybe I didn't protect her enough from how things were. His eyes were full of regret, but not anger, just confusion, that endless ache of not knowing where things went wrong. I reached over and touched his hand gently. Ryan, love doesn't fail because of one person. It fails when two people stop trying at the same time. He stayed quiet for a long while. Then, almost to himself, he said, you know, she told me once that she felt like you and I had a world of our own, that she was always on the outside. I sighed. Maybe that's true. You and I have been each other's world for so long. I should have tried harder to make her feel part of it. He turned to me surprised. You don't have to take a blame, Mom. Blame isn't the point, I said softly. Sometimes, to make peace, someone has to go first. Months passed. Life found its quiet rhythm again, though the echoes of that day never fully left us. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Ryan, but the handwriting, elegant, slanted, I recognized immediately. He opened it at the table. I didn't ask what it said, but as he read, his eyes glistened. When he finally folded it back and placed it beside his cup, he said only, she's moving abroad. Her company offered her a position in Singapore. I nodded, my throat tight. He said she's sorry, he added quietly. Not for leaving, but for the way she spoke to you. I didn't answer. Words weren't enough anymore. But deep inside, something softened. A knot that had been sitting heavy in my chest loosened just a little. He left the
the letter on the table when he went to his room. Later, when the house was silent again, I sat alone and read it. Dear Amara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I know I hurt you, and maybe I can't take that back, but I want you to know I wasn't angry because of who you are. I was angry because I didn't know who I was supposed to be. You loved Ryan so completely that I felt like there was no space left for me. It was my own insecurity, not your cruelty. You showed me kindness I couldn't accept because I was afraid it came with judgment. I hope one day you can forgive me. You're a good mother, maybe too good. When I finished reading, I realized my hands were trembling. Tears spilled onto the paper, blurring the ink. Forgiveness isn't something you decide in a moment. It grows, slowly, quietly, like light creeping back into a dark room. That night I placed the letter in a drawer beside Ryan's baby pictures, not to hide it, but to remember. A year passed. Seasons changed, as they always do. The garden bloomed again. Laughter began to return to our table. Ryan eventually met someone new, a kind, gentle woman named Amina, who carried warmth in her every word. When he introduced her to me, I saw no tension in his eyes, no fear, just peace. A few months later, they married. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. When Amina bent down to touch my feet in respect, something in my chest broke open. I pulled her into an embrace and whispered, "Welcome home." This time, I meant it with every piece of my heart. Later that evening, as the house filled again with laughter and music, I stood by the window looking at the sky turning orange. I thought of Zara, wherever she was. I hope she had found peace too, because no one is truly a villain in their own story. Sometimes we just meet each other at the wrong chapters.
The story might have ended there, quietly, peacefully, if life didn't have a way of circling back to the things we thought we'd left behind. It was nearly 2 years after Zara had left when her name appeared again, unexpectedly, like a ghost carried on the wind. It happened on a Sunday morning. I was setting the table for breakfast when the phone rang. Ryan picked it up. His expression changed from neutral to surprised in an instant. "Zara?" he said softly. I froze. The sound of that name after so long sent a strange shiver through the room. He listened for a while, saying almost nothing, just quiet hmms and "I understand." When he finally hung up, he sat there, staring at the phone like it had just told him something impossible. "She's back in town," he said at last. I kept my voice calm. "Oh, she's divorced?" She wanted to meet. There it was. A name we'd buried. A chapter we thought was closed, now reopening without warning. I didn't say much. It wasn't my place to tell him what to do. He looked uncertain, torn between memory and the life he'd built since then. "Amina knows?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Yes. She said if it helps me make peace with my past, I should go." That's when I realized how rare kindness like that is. Amina wasn't threatened by ghosts. She was strong enough to let him face them. So he went. When Ryan returned later that evening, his face was unreadable. We sat in the living room, the faint hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. "She looked different," he said finally. "Older, tired, but peaceful in a way." I said nothing. He continued. "She told me she'd been through a lot. Her marriage didn't work. She said she understands now what she threw away. Not just me, but the family she could have had." He looked at me then, his eyes full of quiet reflection. He asked if you ever forgave her. I took a deep breath. "And what did you say?" "He told her you did, a long time ago." He was right, because somewhere between grief and acceptance, forgiveness had quietly grown roots inside me. Ryan sighed, leaning back. "She said she could tell you herself. That day in the kitchen, she said it still haunts her." For a moment, the sound of that day came flooding back. The broken plate, the curry on the floor, her trembling voice. But instead of pain, all I felt now was understanding. "I believe her," I said softly. The next week, something unexpected happened. Zara came to see me. It was a quiet afternoon. The doorbell rang, and when I opened it, she was standing there, in a simple white dress, no makeup, her hair pulled back. Her eyes looked softer than I remembered. "Amara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. "Of course." She looked around as she entered. The familiar furniture, the photos on the wall, the scent of jasmine tea. Her eyes lingered on one picture, her and Ryan on their wedding day. "You kept it," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It's still part of his story and mine." We sat at the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into a bag and took out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this," she said, sliding it toward me. Inside were photographs, her new life abroad, a small apartment, colleagues, a few friends. She looked content, not happy in the way youth is happy, but steady, wiser. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her eyes glistening, "for the way you raised him, for not turning him against me. I don't deserve your kindness." I looked at her, the woman who once shouted at me, who made my home feel like a battlefield. But now, sitting before me, she wasn't my enemy. She was a human being who'd lost her way, like we all do at some point. "Zara," I said gently, "we all hurt people when we're scared. You were scared of losing your place in his heart. I understand that now." She lowered her head, tears spilling quietly. "I ruined everything." "No," I said softly. "You taught us all something." When she left that day, I watched her walk away, calm, shoulders no longer heavy with pride or anger. There was peace in her stride, and I found peace too. But not everyone saw it that way. When the neighbors found out she had visited, the whispers started, as they always do in small communities. "Did you hear?
The ex-daughter-in-law came back. Poor Amara. After all that woman put her through, I can't believe she even showed her face there. I heard them all, though I pretended not to. At first I stayed quiet, but one evening when a neighbor named Salma dropped in and said, "You shouldn't have let her in, dear. It makes you look weak," I finally spoke. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Salma. It's remembering that we're all broken in different ways. Some of us are just lucky enough to heal where others can't. She fell silent, her cheeks flushing. That night I told Ryan about it. He smiled faintly and said, "You've always been stronger than people think, Mom. But strength, I've learned, isn't loud. It's in the quiet choices. Letting go, opening the door, offering tea to the person who once made you cry." As time went on, Sarah became something like a distant relative. A chapter we didn't hide but didn't linger on either. She would send holiday cards sometimes, always signed, "Wishing peace to you and Ryan." Amina never minded. Once she even said, "I'm glad she found peace." I think that helped Ryan too. And it did. Because closure doesn't always come through confrontation or revenge. Sometimes it comes through quiet understanding, through realizing that no one wins when we hold on to bitterness. I remember the last time I saw Zara. About a year later. She was leaving for a new job overseas. She stopped by unexpectedly with a small box in her hands. "It's for you," she said. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a tiny charm, a mango slice, perfectly shaped. I looked up, tears already stinging my eyes. She smiled faintly. "I remembered you used to cut mangoes for me. I was too proud to say thank you back then." For a moment, the years between us dissolved. I reached out, took her hand, and said simply, "Thank you, beta." That was the last time we spoke. But when she left that day, I knew something had finally ended. Not with anger, not with regret, but with peace.
Years have a way of softening the sharp edges of pain. You don't even realize it's happening. One morning you wake up and the ache that once lived inside your chest feels like a distant echo instead of a wound. That's how it was for me. By the time Rayan and Amina's first child was born, the storms that once filled this house had long passed. The air smelled of new beginnings, milk, baby powder, and jasmine. I held my granddaughter, little Noor, in my arms and whispered prayers into her tiny ears. She looked up at me with eyes that carried both her father's calm and her mother's fire. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Generations, past mistakes, forgiveness, love, all folded together into this small, sleeping bundle. It was as if God was saying, "Here, this is your peace." One evening, a few weeks later, Rayan sat beside me on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in strokes of gold and crimson. Noor slept inside, Amina humming softly as she rocked her. Rayan looked thoughtful. "You know, Mom, I used to think forgiveness was weakness, that if I forgave Zara, it meant everything she did was okay. And now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Now I realize it wasn't about her. It was about freeing myself, about not carrying her choices on my shoulders anymore." I nodded. That's what people forget. Forgiveness isn't approval, it's release. He leaned back, eyes on the horizon. "Do you ever think about her?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not with sadness. More like gratitude. Because if she hadn't left, you might never have learned what love really means." He looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're right. Amina came into my life when I was finally ready to love without fear. Zara taught me what fear does." Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Laughter, lullabies, quiet evenings filled with stories and tea. But one day, a letter arrived. It was from Zara. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Elegant, deliberate, a little shaky. She wrote that she'd moved to a small coastal town abroad, working with an organization that helped women rebuild their lives after divorce. "I finally understand," she wrote, "that strength isn't in control, but in surrender. I hurt people because I was afraid to be seen as weak. But you showed me what real strength looks like. The way you stood in silence that day, the way you forgave without words, I carried that with me." I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I placed it in my old wooden box, the one where I keep things that remind me of grace. A dried rose from my husband's funeral, a locket from my mother, and Rayan's childhood drawing of our home. It felt right to keep it there, among the symbols of love, loss, and learning. A year later, we got the news. Zara had passed away suddenly in a car accident. The message came from one of her colleagues overseas. They said she'd been on her way to an event for women she was helping. She'd lived simply, quietly, and had even started mentoring young girls. When I told Rayan, he went silent. He didn't cry, not at first, but later that night, I heard him playing the piano, softly, the same melody he once played when she left, except this time it wasn't heavy. It was light, like a goodbye that carried no bitterness, only memory. We lit a candle that night. Amina placed a small flower beside it and whispered, "May she find peace." And for the first time, I truly believed she had. Years rolled forward. Noor grew up into a curious, radiant child. Sometimes she'd ask about the people in our old photographs. One day, she pointed at a wedding picture and said, "Who's that, Dottie?" I looked at the young couple in the frame, Rayan and Zara, all smiles and dreams. "That," I said, smiling softly, "is a story story about love, mistakes, and second chances. Did they live happily ever after? She asked. I thought for a moment. In a way, yes. Because happiness isn't about everything going right. It's about learning, healing, and becoming better after everything goes wrong. She nodded thoughtfully, her little fingers tracing the edge of the frame. Children understand more than we think. Now, when I sit by the window and the sunlight filters through the curtains, I often think about how life weaves people together in strange ways. Some come to stay, others come to teach. Zara was both. Her story was messy, painful, human, but it made all of us stronger, wiser, softer. Sometimes when I cut mangoes for Noor, she giggles and says, "Daddy, you make them so perfect." And I laugh thinking of the girl who once said, "You don't even cut mangoes right." If only she could see us now. In the end, I've learned that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a way of living. It's choosing peace even when anger feels justified. It's remembering that everyone you meet is fighting something unseen. And it's knowing that love, real love, isn't about holding on tightly, but about letting go gently when the time comes. Because life is too short to stay angry, too fragile to stay bitter, and too beautiful to waste on what's already gone. So when people ask me, how did you manage to forgive her? I simply smile and say, because someone once forgave me too. And in that moment, I feel the full circle of it all. The heartbreak, the healing, the grace. The house that once echoed with silence now hums with laughter. The walls that once held pain now hold stories, not of what broke us, but of what rebuilt us. And as I watch Noor chasing fireflies in the garden, her laughter lighting up the dusk, I whisper a quiet prayer into the wind. For Zara, for Rayon, for all of us who once lost our way, but found home again.